All right, so I'd like to extend a warm welcome to everyone that's in this meeting room right now, as well as everyone that's watching this recording. So thank you all for taking the time to be here. And we'll do a few introductions and then move into the purpose of this recording prior to jumping into any of our content. So in the room right now, we have Angela Fitzgerald, who we all know as one of our vice principals with Self-Design. And she'll be speaking specifically to some of the new implementations within our grade 10 year for September 2017. We have Dan Spring, who is an educator within our high school population mainly, has been working as a SEC specifically this past year, really taking on a larger role with that. And then little bits of guiding mentor roles and mentorship within the high school courses. So this is roles as they pertain to this conversation. Joanne is in the room today as a learning consultant for the K-9 population, specifically working with our Gateways community in the past year, really. So that's our grade 8-9 learners at Self-Design. And I'm hosting as a few different roles. One of my big roles is mentor support this year and orientation. So starting to link together some of the missing pieces that mentors are feeling like they need more clarification on. And I'm also here as a high school educator myself and a guiding mentor. So the purpose of this conversation is to take a little bit of a look at some of these roles that I just mentioned. In K-9, the learning consultant role, our special ed consultant role, and in the high school, our guiding mentor role. And to talk a little bit about how all of these roles have one piece in common. And that common thread is supporting our learner. And I think this is so beautiful that we're starting to move into a place in Self-Design where we've recognized that there's a lot of roles and names that are in essence holding a very similar piece. And as we move into our September 2017 school year, we are drawing that learning consultant role into a grade 10 position. So what we'll be talking about today is what that grade 10 learning consultant role looks like and what juicy bits it takes from all these other roles that we're familiar with, whether we're in K-9 or in the high school currently. So this is one of many conversations that is helping us really to link and to bridge some of the gaps that we're missing between the high school and the K-9 population. So I'm very, very grateful for all of this amazing work that's happening. And thank you for all the questions and requests for this video that have come out of the high school mentor group specifically. So we hope that we'll be able to answer some of your questions as we roll ahead. So as I mentioned, one of the common threads is supporting our learners. So I thought we could call to the table. First, let's look at the learning consultant role in K-9. And Joanne, from your experience as a learning consultant, I have two questions for you. How do you, A, support your learners? And then what's the greatest gift of being a learning consultant? And I know for you, it's mainly working with grade 8-9s.
So those are two huge questions. Generally speaking, the first question was about support, correct? I find that the way the family connects with me is that initial point. So usually it's been mom, not always, but usually it's been mom. And it doesn't matter sometimes if it's a kindergarten, grade 3, grade 5, grade 8, there's a lot. If they're new to this world, there can be a lot of questions, a lot of wonderings, a lot of trying to figure out what's going on. Is this going to be enough for their children? Is it going to fit? Are they going to meet? So for me, that initial support is usually for the mama or the parents. Those initial conversations together, it can take some time, but it is so worthwhile. And leading into that juicy connection later on, I find laying that really important groundwork at the beginning of the year or mid-year, whenever that family joins you, taking that time just to really hear, why are they coming to Self-Design? What is it that they hope will work for them? What hasn't worked in the past? Hearing that and really listening to where they're coming to. So in that role of support and hearing them and honoring that path, and then validating that, wow, that's fantastic, and what a beautiful gift this will be for you, for your son, your daughter, your family, whoever's there, and seeing it as a gift and a special opportunity that if it's just this 1 year where it can take them. So then as that year progresses, coming to the end of the year, I actually like writing spring reflections. I like writing because it just summarizes, look at all this really cool, awesome projects, things, ideas that you've looked at. Isn't this enough, if that was the question? Or isn't this where your family wanted to be, or you want to be, or your child? And to really hold that and to celebrate that, that's amazing. I love that. It's a big it's a big moment, but it takes that initial time and then slowly to nurture that until the end of the year when you see this beautiful success.
Beautiful, Joanne. I love the passion in your voice. I'm like right there with you and your learners. Dan, how would you speak to that for from the SEC role specifically? Because I know that's a big one that you've been playing this year.
I would, I guess I can just build on what Joanne said, because from what she was saying there, I got a strong, I had a strong sense of similarity in terms of the kinds of experiences that an SEC has or a high C has working with a family and learners. And one of the things that I would add that, there are forms that we need to fill out, in this role, that there are IEPs and our ILP, which sort of embraces the IEP and adds more information. And then there's countless other forms that we need also to establish that the learner is, indeed a resident of BC, etc. So I find it to be incredibly important to push those back just a little bit and make sure I get a meeting or two in before I start working on those pieces. And I find it's okay to take notes towards those pieces, but just to really connect and to, as Joanne, as you were saying, to listen, to make room to hear is really, really huge. And not to presume anything in terms of support, working with learners in SC. I also find it to be really, really good for families. A lot of them are struggling when they come. They're struggling with the idea that their child may have been recently diagnosed, and so and I don't want to. All the terminology around this seems just a little bit not quite fitting, but to sort of almost, I don't want to say to normalize, but to make it like it's not weird that their child has this, whatever it is they've been diagnosed with, to point out the strengths, because we frequently think of these of conditions as being weaknesses, but they aren't. They're differences, and there are strengths in there. So to point out those strengths is really, really important to bring understanding. And as a result, I find that the families will come out. They'll come out and they'll start to become so much more positive and so much more engaged in the process of supporting their child. So it becomes a real collaboration with the family, because you've helped them to also, and they've helped you to see all these important and wonderful things about their child.
Really nice, Dan. I can speak really briefly to the answer to that question as a guiding mentor. On how we support our learners. And for anyone watching the video who's not familiar with the guiding mentor role, it's actually a course that was created in the high school for grade 10, grade 11, grade 12 learners. Grade 10, 11, 12 course was created independently. And the guiding mentor course was designed just from the foundations of self-design of relationship and support for learners, and being able to carry them in a place where they have the opportunity to connect more deeply with an educator, and based off of actually the learning consultant role from K to 9. And specifically, the guiding mentor role does really look at path to completion and assisting learners in satisfying graduation requirements, and choosing courses that really work for them, and helping them kind of personalize their learning plan along their high school path. Along with that comes a lot of questions about leadership and self-leadership, digital literacy, so we can assist those grade 10 learners in really grasping some of these virtual concepts and give them some credits for it. And and then moving all the way into the grade 12 course of the capstone projects, and following through with some big projects that they are extremely passionate about and they want to take a hold of and present at the end of the year in a portfolio style. So as a guiding mentor myself, I think that, you know, how do I support my learners? Oh man. I think it's by that level of relationship. And I'm hearing that already as a common theme, by listening and by being curious and by prompting questions and really just by knowing them and being there. And what is the greatest gift of being a guiding mentor? I've had the gift of actually following some learners from grade 10 to grade 12 now. And that's so unique, because I know in the K-9 organization that happens. And I always, you know, was thinking, oh, wouldn't that be neat? And now I've, you know, this is my year where I have some of my grade 10s graduating, and yeah, and there's nothing like that. You know, it's really amazing to watch a learner go through it from the role of that support figure along the way, not just the deliverer of the information. That is the other role that I play a lot of. So taking all of these in, you know, the learning consultant, the SEC, and the guiding mentor. Angela, I'd love to hear you speak to your visioning for the grade 10 role of learning consultant that we had been calling maybe a one-to-one educator, and I like that we've come to that understanding that it is a learning consultant. Can you speak to some of the two questions that I mentioned, and feel free to broaden that as well, but how will they support their learners, and what do you envision being a greatest gift of this role?
Yeah, so the SEC is really actually one of the best models of this and of making this transition. We're looking at having the learning consultant be the constant, K-12, and there will be learning consultants who work with learners in probably in K-6, and learning consultants who work with learners in grade 7 to 9, like Joanne does, learning consultants who work with learners in SE, like Dan does, and learning consultants who work with learners in grade 10 to 12. They'll all be learning consultants with various areas added in that are additions rather than differences. So we did used to, you know, Dan talked about the SEC being like an LC. It's not that long ago that it was actually. We had LCs, and some of those LCs worked with SE learners. So really, when we changed it to the SEC, it was just semantics. It didn't actually change what was happening. In fact, it was, anyway, so the SEC is an LC who also manages a budget and also works with SEAs to provide different supports, also does an IEP that is in addition to the LP that every LC does. So they do everything that an LC does, and then they have some additional things. So similarly, an LC who works in grade 10 will be doing everything that an LC does, which is communicating weekly, doing seasonal reports that update the learning plan, creating a learning plan with the learner, and then the seasonal reports are a check-in. Hey, how are you doing with your goals? Where are we at? And in addition to that, that LC will be doing something different than those who work in K-9, in that they will be holding awareness of grad plans. So they will be holding awareness of, hey, this learner wants to be a doctor. So there's going to be some different kinds of course choices and coursework required, because we hold a responsibility there. We don't want that learner to get to grade 12 and then find out they didn't do the prep they needed for their life goals. And there are other learners that absolutely don't need to be thinking about any of those things, because their goals don't involve post-secondary academic education. So I'm going to be working differently with that learner than I am with the one who actually has a very focused post-secondary academic goal. And so that's the piece that will be additional to an LC. So it won't be different than LC work. It will be a layer in addition to LC work.
And then within that, what do you see as being like maybe like the most exciting part of that job as you've been working with the role description and kind of dreaming this up?
Well, we've talked about relationship. I think everyone here mentioned relationship, and that's fantastic. And I can't imagine trying to establish relationship with 175 kids. So if I'm working in the high school as a mentor and I have to me, it's like getting a huge pay raise. In a school system, in a brick and mortar school, to have class size reduced is equivalent to getting a pay raise when unions are negotiating. So we're talking right now about reducing class size from 175 to 31. It's unheard of in any, to have that big of a change and to be in the same pay grade with 35 learners as you were with 175. So as an educator who's worked in various school settings, that part's pretty exciting to me.
And as a mentor who has had a lot of the learners over the years, that part's also exciting to me. Yeah. And really it just makes sense, doesn't it? When we look at our values at Self-Design. So another piece that is new to the high school educators right now is the concept of having an educator bio. And we're in the process over the next few weeks of designing these educator bios that will be published to a website that learners and families will be looking at in order to kind of find the best matching for this learning consultant and the learner. I'm wondering if either Joanne or Angela, you can speak a little bit more about like how the bio draws and connects learners and families, and then maybe a bit about sort of what sense of community there is around learning consultants. Because I've heard a little bit about this from you, Joanne, in the past, that there's a little bit of community as well of learning consultants knowing each other and knowing learners and being able to kind of assist in that process. So that's all fairly new for us. I'd love for that to be highlighted as well.
Okay. Oh, go ahead, Angela.
Okay, I'll start, and then I want to throw it over to you, Joanna, because I just want to just do it as a little add-on to what I just said about learners potentially going on into medicine, whereas other learners don't have academic post-secondary goals, or at least formal academic institution goals. And as someone who's wanting learners to know whether I'm the right person to guide them, if I have perhaps a math or science degree, I'm going to want to make sure that's in my bio, because that's what some learners are going to want as support for those post-secondary academic goals. So it's those kinds of things that we want to make sure, because families are going to have very different reasons for choosing a learning consultant in grade 10. Some families want a lot of help with that, believing it's okay, like this is legit, I can pull my kid out of school and it's still okay. So someone with lots of homeschooling or unschooling experience, maybe if I've led my own children through an unschooling experience and now they're doing post-secondary things out in the world, I'm going to want to put that in my bio, because some families want, like, wait a minute, does this work? And if you have real experience in it working, make sure it's in your bio. Other families are totally fine with that. They have enough of a community of that in their own real world in real time. And so they're going to be looking for people who have subject specializations because they can't help their kid with math. Some of them actually have a math degree themselves. So they don't need that in their LC. So there's so many different reasons people choose to work with a learning consultant. As a parent of a child who's been through this system, I choose a learning consultant who can offer something I can't offer. So in that vein, when you're writing your bio, make sure you share all the information that might be relevant for someone making this choice.
Angela pretty much covered it. The other few pieces maybe that I can add in, because I asked families, why out of the huge list? Sometimes it's location. Sometimes, and that can work in both ways. Sometimes I know families in my community here who do not want to ever see their LC. That is someone who's remote and distant, and that's really important. A lot of learners or families have connected with me because I live close by. or I live in their area, or I can see them potentially a little bit more easily than I could if they lived, for example, on an island somewhere. So that's a piece too. So if you're comfortable with putting your location out there, I would put that in too, because you never know. My bio also has some humor in it, and that seems to connect with some families. So they know that, yes, there's that teacherly sort of side, but I'm also a person just along in this journey too, in the same way. And so that sense of humor connects as well. Like Angela said, I've listed my experience and where I've been working, who I've been working with, or with my children, and the fact that we're doing this as well. So that also connects with some families too. So yeah, it doesn't have to be all academic, is what I'm trying to say. It can be location, it can be, as I said, for me, it's a bit of a sense of humor too. There is also that academic element. And if you really only want to work with certain grades or ages, put that in there. If you're really okay with working with a huge range, put that in there. Some LCs are and some LCs aren't. I personally, I'm great with a wide range, and that works really well for me. Some people don't want that. So be really clear too, so then you're not like, I don't really feel comfortable in this, and you may feel obligated. So I'd be clear about that.
Yeah, and we have other families who've given feedback on how they made their choice, and some have said it's the photograph. And one learning consultant has just like her face like this with a big smile, and she said so many people have chosen and have said it was that smile. That's how so they connected that way. And then others have said, oh, we chose our LC because she was wearing a baby in a sling. Like they saw that in the picture. So that LC hadn't thought to put attachment parenting in her bio, but that was important to that family, and they could tell that from the photograph. So those kinds of things are relevant as well.
Beautiful. And yeah, can you speak to the community aspect of this role that I see happening in K-9, and that I'm really excited for grade 10 learning consultants to experience? Yeah.
So in our current model, we have the LC conference, and we also have another subgroup of LC to LC sharing. So in both of those venues, we're able to put questions out there. If it's like a panic moment of, oh my goodness, I lost all my documents, or hey, I'm really struggling for the right approach to respond to this reflection. I just don't know. So it can range in the type of questions that are out there, which is really beautiful. It's a very open, safe space to share that way. Another deep way of connecting is the collab. And as a Northern gal, I'm just, gonna miss that. But that face-to-face is really important too. So as we get more into the Zoom meetings or other online approaches, I can see that also being really important too, because putting the face to the words that someone's writing, I can see someone's sense of humor, or I can get just a little bit more understanding of who they are. So so being willing to share yourself in those questions, in those moments, in those panics or bliss moments too of, hey, this is great, or this is a super resource, or whatever it is, just helps to keep that community building and sharing those ideas.
Yeah, and another thing in those same sharing contexts, sometimes LCs will say, I have to reduce my workload for whatever various reasons, and there are these 3 families I've been working with, and they need a new learning consultant. And then there'll be a description of those families and their learners, and does anybody feel that they would have a connection? Because it's a really nice, when we have to move on from working with learners, typically we share in that message a recommendation for new learning consultants, instead of just saying, hey, I'm done, go find somebody from the LC bio page. It's a nicer way to hand off instead. And so that's something that's shared among LCs when their learner numbers change for whatever reason. Or sometimes an LC will say, hey, I really need another 3 learners to, make my rent this month. and typically that then comes into kind of some shared support to get those 3 learners for that learning consultant.
Thank you for speaking to that. That sense of community. I've heard about it just in passing conversations with various LCs, and I think it's nice to have that on recording because it's we work in a fairly large organization, all things considered. So any opportunity that we have to learn from each other's experiences, I think, is so valuable, and to be able to support our families and our learners as well through any transitions that might be occurring, and provide good recommendations. That's really great.
And early on, I don't know, Angela can maybe speak to this if it's still in existence, but when we begin our first year, second year, third year, there are these other sub-conferences that can happen. So for example, Nancy would support specific questions for second year and third year mentors. So it's like a little bit of a safer space, because in the huger LC community, when there's just tons of us, it might, I don't know, I can speak to myself. I felt a little intimidated my first year, second year, typing in, how do I put this in this document again? And so Nancy would sort of be holding us in this little sort of sheltered space before moving off into the bigger LC world. So that creates feelings of connection too, because I remember who I was interning with, and the questions and things like that we had, and that ways of support. So having that also builds community.
Wonderful. And Dan, I'm wondering if you have any questions for either Angela or Joanne on anything that we just kind of shared with us, because I know this is also fairly new for.
I don't know how far the envisioning has gone in terms of what we see happening in the different definitions of the specific things that people will be doing in the different roles that they may fulfill at the 10 to 12 level. So I don't know if it's the right time to really start asking in-depth questions about that. But I would like to know more as it develops, and I have a feeling it'll be forthcoming probably in the future more, and maybe that's something that we're not really we're just kind of, this is maybe a part of that imagining that we're doing.
Yeah, things are definitely moving along though, and that's why I think there may be multiple recordings like this. So it's a really nice way to hear updates on developments in the school, is through open houses, through these nice interview style recordings. And to give a little bit more feedback for Dan and anyone watching, we will be, of course, sending this out to all educators. And in the next day or so, we're also sending out the bio template for the learning consultant role within the grade 10 year. So this movement is starting to happen, right? The rivers are starting to flow. It's springtime. Snow is melting, and it's a pretty exciting time to be part of this organization. So we will keep our eyes peeled for all sorts of communications, and they'll be coming from me right now to the educators in the high school about more momentum with this learning consultant role in the grade 10 year. And as a rough timeline, there'll be roughly 2 weeks given for these bios to be created. And then when we start to look into May will be our orientation month for this role. So there's various forms of orientation that will be occurring both online in our new learning platform, as well as in Zoom meetings that will be 2 hours in length, and really beautifully outlined to provide a nice scope as to the expectations for this role, and some tools to help educators move forward with this. So more details to come on all of those timelines and specifics, but this feels like a really nice sort of wrap up for our recording. So I'm wondering any final messages or words any of you wanted to share before we all say adios.
Thanks, Sarah, for holding this and bringing us together.
I think it's a great opportunity. I think it's what the community has wanted, is a greater connection between Self-Design High and the Key to 9 world. And now I see that merging just so beautifully and so well supported. I think it's going to be a great experience for people transitioning with their work, and just shifting how that's going to happen. It's going to be great.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much to Angela, Joanne, and Dan for taking this time to be part of this great conversation. And thanks to everyone for watching, and stay tuned for more updates.